With the OnePlus 3T, we got virtually the same body as the OnePlus 3, but packed with a new processor, more RAM, and a bigger battery. This year though, there isn't a new processor available from Qualcomm yet, and the 6 to 8 GB of RAM offered in the OnePlus 5 was already the highest the industry had ever seen. So many naturally wondered what OnePlus would do this time to entice customers to buy a new device just 5 months after the previous one. As I mentioned earlier, the specs are the same as the OnePlus 5 from earlier this year, because Qualcomm still has not announced their new flagship mobile processor. Nevertheless, the Snapdragon 835 and 6 to 8 GB of RAM tear through just about anything you can throw at them. This time around, it's all about the display. There aren't any additional dongles, cables or earbuds included, but the inclusion of a headphone jack is a more than welcome trade-off. While most companies seem to be moving away from the headphone jack in favor of USB Type-C and Bluetooth audio, OnePlus sticks to the basics to give consumers what they actually want. While it might be nice to offer a USB Type-A to USB Type-C adapter for data transfer as Google does, it's not the end of the world since account-based backups have become so good. Turning to design, the OnePlus 5T is essentially the same as its predecessor, but still recognizably new. The new 6-inch screen occupies a much larger amount of the front of the device, which is a welcome change for 2017. Because of this, the fingerprint reader has now been moved to the back. This will almost certainly be a controversial move, but it was necessary in order to maintain the form factor OnePlus wanted to utilize. Even though OnePlus is packing a huge display in a body that isn't much larger than the display itself, the device doesn't feel too big. Everything in Oxygen OS scales nicely to the new 18:9 aspect ratio, and you probably wouldn't notice a difference in content unless you booted up a video and saw the option to expand it to cover the whole display. The camera bump is now slightly more pronounced, since the company no longer had room to fit all the components behind the top bezel. While this change is definitely noticeable, it isn't a deterrent by any means, and the edges are now rounded as opposed to the sharper angles housing the OnePlus 5 camera. While the rest of the specs might make you think this camera is exactly the same as before, it's actually one of the major changes in this iteration. OnePlus has replaced the 1.6x optical telephoto lens with a 1x20MP shooter that uses groups of 4 pixels to capture more light and apparently do better in low light circumstances. Besides these changes, the body is almost exactly the same. It uses the same aluminum alloy shell and has the same antenna lines as the 5, but the body is just a tiny bit bigger. You've still got the same tactile power button and volume rockers, and the hardware-based notification switch returns with the same satisfying clicky feel. If you haven't held a OnePlus 5 or OnePlus 5T before, I really suggest you do. While most affordable phones settle for plastic housings and cheap materials, the OnePlus 5T feels every bit if not more premium than other flagships on the market. The 5T retains the ultra-slim and polished chassis of the OnePlus 5 as well as the 3300 mAh battery that fared well in the OnePlus 5.